Welcome to Teaching Orchestra. In my last video, I made an argument about why Midnight Rain is harder than it looks, and I also made another argument that the texture is the aesthetic substance to this piece, meaning that it's how the piece is developed and how the expression is done is to the focus of textural changes. So how are we going to highlight the texture and make it sound obvious and effective to our audience so that they can come on that journey with us? So first, we have to master the articulations. If you sit down to play this, particularly the first violin part, but in all parts, you're going to probably notice that there's a lot of bowings that are given. In fact, for a while, every single bowing to every single note is given. And if you know me, or if you're a subscriber to this channel, you probably know that I don't care for the overbowing of parts. It's just too much. Less is more. But here, I kind of see the point because the articulations are so important and they serve to sort of limit the errors. If you're playing along and you see a redundant bowing and you miss something, you'll probably notice what you missed. But there's also the boy who cried wolf phenomenon, where the redundancy of bowings may cause the performer to completely disregard the bowings in general. And there's some validity to that argument too, because you can always add them if you want to, but you're going to need some whiteout if you want to remove them. But the thing is, would your students actually write in the bowings if you asked them to? Especially the students at this level. Are the students actually going to dare to write anything in their music? And in either case, when you start to look at these bowings, you'll notice some inconsistencies. You'll notice a pattern of bowing in the melody where we bow two, slur two, bow two, slur two. But sometimes we don't always have that. We break from it in the cascading part where we détaché bow everything. We just bow everything as it comes. And then here in measure 11, we've got eighth notes again where we break from our traditional bowing. We've got the slur here, but no slur here. So you might think, hey, so maybe I do want to add a slur. I want to add a slur and then I don't need a lift there. I can just bow it as it comes here. But I think that's kind of a mistake. You might also notice that there's a dotted half note here, but only a half note here. Where it's basically the same thing. So why is there a rest here and this is coming in? Well, it's because something else is changing. So I think that, you'll see some inconsistencies that surface as you come up, but, try not to correct all of them because I think those textural changes do make a difference. I think that there was a lot of time put into making sure everything was the articulations were written the way that they're supposed to be. So I would, typically not want to just change all the bowings in the score and try them as they're written first. And if you really can't get them to work, maybe make an adjustment. But I think that the texture is extremely important in Midnight Rain. So do your best to do what's written here. And this might especially be true here for these short bow lifts here in measure 27, and we also have them here in measure 38 as well. You might think, why are those there? It kind of breaks from the legato style, and should you take them out, add a slur or something? You could go through this piece and rebow it to something more logical.
Argumentum ad ignorantium, or arguing from ignorance.
And when you're rebowing the music in this way, you're looking for uniformity, right? You want a uniform style, you want a uniform sound, you want uniform bowings, and that would suggest that uniformity is the goal because the focus should be on the melodic development or the harmonic development. But look, this piece is entirely diatonic, until the very last note we get the C sharp. But other than this section here at 48, we really don't get a lot of melodic development at all. It's the same melody, and so what else changes? It's the texture. So what changes? What does develop? I think it's the texture, so I wouldn't change the bowings, and I would highlight the differences because it helps to tell the story.
It's only logical.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's go back through and see what this music calls for and figure out a strategy how to teach it. If not everything's uniform, you might need a different strategy to teach it. And, the melodic bowings are sort of backwards from the Mozart bowing, and they might not have had too much exposure to it. The bow two, slur two. The performers are likely to have the same problem with this as they do with Mozart, which is that the second slurred note is often cut short. Orchestras tend to shorten that second note of the slur. It's important to get that note length right because we need that distinction. Besides the note length, we need the articulation on both the slurred notes and the détaché notes. In both cases, we need adequate finger pressure with the left hand, and I recommend teaching this by playing this with the relevant arpeggios with just the left hand first. I like to use a technique I call finger tappers, meaning that the students tap hard enough on the string so that they can hear each note. And that serves as a good test to see if there's enough left-hand articulation, which is going to be very valuable in the slurs because it does all the articulation in the slurs. But on the détaché notes, it's going to really help too. I spent a lot of time designing this teaching companion to get the most out of this work and to make sure that your students are learning the technique that they're required to play Midnight Rain, and not just Midnight Rain, but any other piece. And this is available on my website, teachingorchestra.com. Like in all of my teaching companions, I start with the finger patterns first, and we mostly have minor patterns in this. Every once in a while, we have a major pattern, but the B is really a conserved note in Midnight Rain. F is also a conserved note too, which is why we don't have the open pattern on the E string. The very end, we do have the C sharp. So be careful for that. And, if your cellos are going to play some of this in second position, you're going to need that augmented or extended fingering for that too. So after these finger patterns, we go into these finger building exercises, and I teach these left hand first, of course, just to tap, make sure we're getting enough pressure on these finger additions. And then we just go from E to F, and then from F to G, and then from G to A. And this is the most important one because especially for your shoulder instruments, they're going to have the most trouble getting these A's. I also like to develop the slurs. So we slur all four notes first just to make sure that our left hand is doing what it's supposed to do, and then we focus on the right hand. We slur two, slur two, slur two, and then once we get enough coordination, we slur two, bow two, slur two, bow two. And you might think, well, that's the opposite of what we're doing here, but it really doesn't matter. You could put the slurs over here, you could put the slurs over here. It doesn't matter either way. The technique is the same. They're just going back and forth from this to that. Sometimes in this piece too, the cellos do the slur two at the beginning. A lot of times that happens, so it's good to teach it both ways. But either way, we're emphasizing the left hand pressure, right? We're emphasizing those finger tappers, and the bow comes later. Now, you don't need to buy the teaching companion. You can do all of this stuff by rote, and you can just get up and demonstrate for the students and, do the follow the leader thing, and that works out really well in your class, and it's going to be just fine. Some people do like to be more organized, and they like to have the printed stuff, and they like their students to have copies, and they feel like they have a limited amount of time to work on it, so they want to go, and they don't have time to explain the thing orally and then, pass it on back and forth, and they just want something printed, and that's why I've got the website, and that's why I sell these on the website. But the fourth finger is going to be super important because there's a lot of the fourth finger stuff, and we want to make sure that we have enough finger pressure because it emphasizes the articulation, especially on the slurs, okay? The lower strings have a lot of fourth finger stuff too, and this is going to affect their tuning if they don't have firm fourth fingers, and I'm going to address this more in my next video when I talk about the left-hand stuff, but anyway, make sure that your students have enough grip on the string with the bow, especially in the low strings. They've got a lot of arpeggios and stuff, and you really want to put some torque from the bow onto the string and make sure that you've got enough bow weight so that the hair is wrapping around the string a little bit. And please watch your students when they play. I know there's a fear of getting lost, like if you break eye contact with your score just for a second, you're going to get lost, but it's okay. Don't worry about it, because if you don't look up at your students, you're going to miss some things. And one thing you want to look for is bow tension. If your students are playing with their bows too tight, which is a very common thing at this level, sometimes your students think that they need to tighten the screw all the way in until it stops moving, and that makes things really difficult because they're going to be fighting against the tension in the bow to achieve the same amount of grip as when they have a more reasonable amount of tension. And, I want to save this point for last because we're talking about articulation. The bow direction is the thing that we tend to fixate on, even though it doesn't have as much impact on the other things. But I've gone over the slurs and I've gone over the grip, and now we can start talking about the bow direction. And if you get your head out of the score, you're going to start looking at the bows and you're going to notice popcorn bows. And if you don't know what popcorn bows are, it's just a figure of speech that means that one or more students is bowing independently from the rest of their section. So if you look up, you can see who's playing the popcorn bows. And that means they're having difficulty with the bowings. But specifically, where are they getting tripped up? And if you're watching closely, you can isolate that spot, and it's very helpful. And as I stated earlier, bowings aren't the sole focus of everything, but it does help to have uniform bowings. And these bowings are going to be a lot trickier than a lot of your grade 2 and grade 3 works, and you're likely to have to address some of it. So in this section here at 48, there's a lot of patterns where you've got an odd number of notes in the measure or an odd number of bows in the measure. So like in the cellos, for instance, you're going to have like an odd number of bowings. So this time through is going to be a down bow, and then this time through is going to be an up bow, and then down bow, etc. Whereas, in the violins and violas, it's going to be down bow here, and then up bow here again, then down bow, up bow. So it's like patterns of 2, kind of like we have had at the beginning, where we got a pattern of 2, pattern of 1. We see this a lot here in the texture. But anyway, this is a spot that you're probably going to have to isolate because they might get tripped up in the bowing, so you might have to slow some of this down. You might have to have them shadow bow it and get more comfortable. In my next video, I'm going to be addressing the string crossings, and there's a lot of string crossings, especially in the cello part. And so I'm going to give you some strategies on how to make that easier, so I hope to see it in the next video.